Sahana Bhavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Together we'll chant Bhagavad Gita, chapter 11, verses 21 to 30.
अमीहित्वां सुरसङ्घा विशन्ति केचिद्भीताः प्राञ्जलयो गृह्णन्ति स्वस्तीत्युक्त्वा महर्षिः सिद्धसङ्घाः स्तुवन्ति त्वां स्तुतिभिः पुष्कलाभिः रुद्रादित्या वसवो ये च साध्याः विश्वेश्विनौ मरुतश्चोष्मपाश्च गन्धर्वयक्षासुरसिद्धसङ्घाः वीक्षन्ते त्वां विस्मिताश्चैव सर्वे रूपं महत्ते बहुवक्त्र नेत्रम् महाबाहो बहुबाहूरुपादम् बहूदरं बहुदंष्ट्राकरालम् दृष्ट्वा लोकाः प्रव्यथितास्तथाहम् नभस्पृशं दीप्तमनेकवर्णम् व्यात्ताननं दीप्तविशालनेत्रम् दृष्ट्वा हि त्वां प्रव्यथितान्तरात्मा धृतिं न विन्दामि शमं च विष्णो दंष्ट्राकरालानि च ते मुखानि दृष्ट्वैव कालानलसन्निभानि दिशो न जाने न लभे च शर्म प्रसीद देवेश जगन्निवास अमी च त्वां धृतराष्ट्रस्य पुत्राः सर्वे सहैवावनिपालसङ्घैः भीष्मो द्रोणः सूतपुत्रस्तथासौ सहास्मदीयैरपि योधमुख्यैः वक्त्राणि ते त्वरमाणा विशन्ति दंष्ट्राकरालानि भयानकानि केचिद्विलग्ना दशनान्तरेषु सन्दृश्यन्ते चूर्णितैरुत्तमाङ्गैः यथा नदीनां बहवोऽम्बुवेगाः समुद्रमेवाभिमुखा द्रवन्ति तथा तवामि नरलोकवीराः विशन्ति वक्त्राण्यभिविज्वलन्ति यथा प्रदीप्तं ज्वलनं पतङ्गाः विशन्ति नाशाय समृद्धवेगाः तथैव नाशाय विशन्ति लोकाः तवापि वक्त्राणि समृद्धवेगाः लेलिह्यसे ग्रसमानः समन्तात् लोकान् समग्रान् वदनैर्ज्वलद्भिः तेजोभिरापूर्य जगत्समग्रम् भासस्तवोग्राः प्रतपन्ति विष्णो
Any questions?
Yes, Jackie. I asked the last Sunday's question, gross and subtle. So we were discussing that how one doesn't pervade the other, and I couldn't understand that. So if you...
Okay, so what is the definition of gross or what is subtle? So how do you determine whether something is more gross or more subtle? Something is considered to be more subtle if it has two characteristics: pervasion and control. If something pervades something, it is considered subtle, and if it controls it, it is considered subtle. So the managing director of a firm is subtler than the labor in the firm or the managers in the firm. Why is that? Because every labor or every manager, he's responsible for something, right? He has a certain responsibility. What is the managing director's responsibility? He has to pervade, his responsibility pervades everything, and therefore he also controls everything. Suppose a production manager says, I've produced. Okay, his job is done. He's not concerned whether anything is being sold or not. So he can be least bothered with what is happening in sales. His job is to get production done. But a managing director can't do that. He has to ensure that production and sales are matched, and he's responsible for the whole thing. So what is subtler? Take music, for instance. A person sings what Justin Bieber sings, whatever he sings. I don't know what he sings. I haven't ever heard it, so I can't comment. But with some popular music, he sings. Now, is he subtler, or let us say somebody like Bhimsen Joshi? Now, how will you decide? So, whatever Justin Bieber can do, Bhimsen Joshi can also do. So he pervades. Classical music will pervade popular music and therefore also control it. Control in the sense, they'll be able to do whatever they want with reference to that level of music. So the classical musician will sing everything or play everything that the popular musician does. And the popular musician cannot do what the classical one does. So he doesn't pervade it. Right? So there is a pervasion and control that gives us subtlety. That's how we know. So far, so good?
Yes. So when it comes to body and mind...
Okay, Preeti?
Yes, Janki ji. So when it comes to body and mind, how our gross body action impacts our subtle mind.
Okay. So now let's go to our own physical body. Now, what is subtler in our personality? The mind is subtler than the body. Why
Yes.
is the mind subtler than the body? Wherever the body is, the mind is. The mind can cover all of this. The mind can go where the body cannot go. Imagine your eyes. How far can they see, for instance? Or your ears, how much can you hear? Or your tongue, how much can it taste? Right? So there is a limit. Now your mind can go beyond that.
Mm.
Right? So you can't see your brother in America, let us say, but your mind can think of him.
Mm.
Right? So it pervades everything the body can do, and it goes beyond. Now, intellect is subtler than the mind. Intellect is subtler than the mind because it can go wherever the mind can go. And it can even go into areas unknown where the mind cannot go. Okay, so it is something new which the mind has, the mind can only go to what it knows. My father, my mother, my sister, my brothers, my subject can only do this much. Intellect can go beyond that. Right, so this is the hierarchy. Body grossest, mind subtler, intellect subtlest.
Right.
Now, what is the rule? That intellect has to control the mind has to control the body. But that's not what happens. If you fall ill, for instance,
Yes.
then you're in a bad mood. You feel sorry for yourself, or whatever you feel like you're in a bad mood, right? So that means, therefore, that the body is affecting the mind, which should not be true, because mind has to control
Yes.
the body cannot control mind. Similarly, if your mind is taken off to some desire, your intellect may try to pull the reins all it wants, but it can't do that. So it seems that the theory falls. So you all have had 1 week to think about how this is. Does anybody know how is this possible? If the intellect is subtler than the mind, how does the mind control it? If the body is subtler than the mind, then how does the body control the mind? So you all have had 1 week. Anyone new in class will get totally lost today. Anybody is new, let us see. Nobody, right? They're all oldies. Okay, all us oldie goldies today. So, how is it? Did anyone come up with any answer?
Ankiji, yes, as soon as we logged off last time, I just thought of an example. For instance, we have a cycle, pedal and the wheels. The default way is to use the pedal to move the wheels so that the pedal will act upon the wheels and control it. But in terms of an emergency or repair, the reverse works. You can use the wheels to align the chain and control the pedal. So the best way to do it is to use the pedal to move around and act upon the wheels. But in terms of emergency or repair needed, there you would adjust the wheels and then you would control the movement of the pedal. So that's how it seems like the mind is the default way to control the body. It's more pervasive in controlling. It's more subtle. But then there are situations where you can use the body to control the mind.
Philosophy, one second, let me just finish.
Yeah.
The thing about philosophy is base principle, no exceptions. Base principle. Because if your philosophy is worth its name, you have to find a theory that fits all conditions. Okay, now in what you are saying, you can use as a practical thing. But now you all are studying philosophy. And the nature of philosophy is your theory has to fit every condition, whatever theory you come up with. This is where, it becomes a bit difficult. That is for many more for serious students of philosophy who really want to understand it from basic first principles. Then one of the first principles is subtle pervades and controls the gross. You can never find an example that violates this. And if you do find this example, then you have to change the basic theory. This is why it is so easy to talk on philosophy, because Nobody's interested in an all-pervasive theory, so you can say anything anytime and get away with it. But not in this class, at least I hope. No, it's so easy to talk about these things with a lot of thought. So 9, though what you may say that, it can be accepted by anyone as a practical thing, philosophically, no. You cannot find a single exception to a single Vedantic law, because if you find a single example, that law has to be changed. Sorry for holding up such high ideals, but that's the subject. What can I do? Not my fault. Yeah, Preeti, what did you want to say?
I thought about it quite a lot, and I could be 100% wrong, but what I thought is that through mind and intellect, so in a subtlest way, we perceive, feel, and think. So although whatever gross conditions, body or outside, but the thinking, perceiving, and feeling part is through our subtlest. So that is how probably it, in a way, reconciles this.
Janki ji, may I?
Yeah, 1 second, Uttara. Let me just see what they've written. Deep Raj. The gross limits the functioning of the subtle. The same way the fertility of the soil limits the growth of the tree. If you say, Deep Raj, that the gross limits the functioning of the subtle, then you have controlled it. The gross can control it. The gross cannot limit the functioning of the subtle. In other words, because I can't see my brother in America, I cannot think of my brother in America. Impossible. Remember, your theory always has to be all-pervasive. Why is Vedanta considered the subtlest knowledge? Because its theories are all-pervasive. Asha, when mind has become weak, then body can control. No, Asha, not a possibility. When they are in equal quantity, then mind can control the body. Not true for mind and body. The mind doesn't become, when the mind becomes weak, at least in Vedanta, that's a good thing, right? Not that it ever becomes weak, but we'd be happy if it was weak. It just grows stronger and stronger.
I meant limiting as in covering, like how the mind covers the intellect and the vasanas cover the self.
Yeah, not possible. Vasanas cannot cover the self, mind cannot cover the intellect. Not possible. See, this is the difference in talking practical stuff and talking philosophy. Let's see. Meaning when the subtle becomes weak. No. Uttara, you were going to say something.
So, Janki ji, I want to give an example in support of this philosophical theory that subtle always controls gross. So, I want to give an example that if a man is walking on embers, so physically it should hurt his feet, he should burn and everything, and yet he's able to walk peacefully. That means he has changed the thought process. So he has changed his thinking and intellect, has been able to control the physical. So we can still hold that theory that of course subtle is controlling the gross, because although very evidently physical should affect his mind, but the man is still able to walk on the embers, burning embers, and so subtle is controlling the gross.
You cannot bring that up in this context because why can't you say this in this context? Can anyone say why Uttara cannot bring up this example? Because this is what you have to learn. Because this was group discussion, then somebody has to point out that this example is not applicable here. Why not?
Is it because we've already established that subtle will control and pervade the gross? So Our example is just proving that, right?
Yes, our question is, how is it that when we know that the subtle controls and pervades the gross, then how is it that so many examples we're able to find where the gross has affected the subtle? How did that happen? Because if it is a basic principle, it cannot be violated. It's an axiom, it cannot be violated. And if it gets violated, you find a single example of violation, you have to throw the principle out. Because philosophically or in Vedanta, you have to bring it down finally to eternal laws. That's what why the subject is called Sanatana Dharma, eternal laws. True for all people at all time in every way. All right. So how is it that the body affects the mind? The mind is its intellect is strong, okay. At the time of death, subtler mind and intelligence goes to another gross body through soul. Prakash, in this context, that is irrelevant. Why would we say that? This Deep Raj, the subtle has attached itself to the gross. The subtle has attached itself to the gross. So what? Even if it attaches itself to the gross, why would it influence it?
Then anything that happens to the gross will affect the subtle because it has attached itself to the gross.
It's an interesting point, though I don't know how that fits in here. Okay, that's an interesting way of looking at it, but so in our example, what are you saying? That the mind has attached itself to the body and therefore it is suffering whatever the body is suffering. That's what you're trying to say. That's, I suppose, an interesting view on it. She's saying the same thing because we give more importance to our body. Okay, it's an interesting view on it. Now, Asha, you were saying something?
Janki, just explaining what has been written. Like if there are 5 units of the gross and 5 units of the subtle, then the subtle will be more powerful. But if there is 1 unit of a subtle and 10 units of gross, then probably the gross would be stronger.
There were 5 Pandavas and 100 Kauravas. There was 1 Krishna and 11 Akshawanis. I mean, you don't need to go to Indian scriptures. You can also go to Greece and Greece. No, where I believe I'm forgetting his name. He used to be my ideal at one point.
Archimedes.
Archimedes, thank you, Bharat. Archimedes against a whole galley. He protected his city by himself. One person protected the city against a galley. The entire naval barrage, one person handled it. So, not okay in this context. We are able to perceive gross, so we feel the gross is controlling subtle. Okay, you'll have to do a lot of derivation to come to the answer. Okay, you all give up now? Or you all have something further to say? Okay, try and look at it like this. Okay, LC. When a person is in coma due to physical problems, how can mind and intellect function? Okay, so you're giving another example, LC, where mind and intellect have been shut off because body is in coma. So you're giving an example of how the gross controls subtle. Correct, your example is right. Okay, so how does gross control subtle? Now we have to understand, what do these terms mean? When you say gross control subtle, take an example, easy example. I am not well. And because I am not well, I am not able to do my studies. Okay, I've got high temperature, I've got 104 degrees temperature, I can't do my studies. So that is a clear example, it appears, of gross controlling the subtle. It is not. Why is it not? Because of the following reason. When we say that something controls something, it means it has the power to change it. Correct? Otherwise, how is it controlling if it cannot change it? It has the power to change it. Now, if you have 104 temperature and you cannot study, has this affected your intellect? It has not affected your intellect. The power of your intellect continues to be whatever it is. Isn't it? So there has been no effect that the 104 degrees temperature has had on your intellect. Your intellectual capacities continue to be the same. Or for instance, take another thing. You are ill and therefore you don't want to eat rasagulla, which you love. Has it affected your desire for rasagulla? No. How do we know that? When the temperature goes, all this is right where it was as it was. No change has been affected. Is that clear?
But momentarily it has affected, right?
It has not affected. That is where Deepraj's point comes. It is not affected at all. Affectation means it has been changed in some way. It has not been changed. When you put your finger over your eye, okay, and therefore you cannot see the sun, you have not affected the sun in any way. That's why Deepraj, vasanas are not affected the self in any way. This thing about called covering, you haven't covered it. It has not affected it in any way. It is what it originally was. You have no access to it, doesn't mean any change has happened there. Okay. All right, Preeti.
Yes, very well. Thank you.
All right. So let us proceed then. What are we talking about in these verses? Is about fear. In other places in the text, you will hear about desire. Here, it's not about desire, it's about fear. You all know, of course, that fear is the offshoot, is the development from desire. Right? Everybody knows that. Anybody is not clear how fear comes from desire? Okay. So we're all clear about that.
No, I am not clear.
Oh,
Can you
okay.
just...
All right. So when you want something a lot, then you create within yourself the fear of not getting it, or having got it, you create the fear of losing it. But you cannot ever be frightened of losing something you don't want. Does that happen? What are you frightened of? You're frightened I might lose family or friends or name or reputation or life, or you want a piece of cake on the table and you're seeing that Deepraj is making his way to the table and you're frightened he may take the last piece. Why are you frightened? Because you want that piece of cake. Suppose you didn't want that piece of cake. Suppose you wanted the rasagulla on the table. Now you'll be frightened of the Deepraj will take the rasagulla. So every fear is derived from the fact that you want that thing. Okay, why are we so frightened of nuclear war? We are only worried about what will happen to us. That's all. So every fear generates from what we want. If we didn't want it, we have no fear. That is why people who are self-realized, they are free of fear. How can they fear anything? Because they can't fear the loss of anything because they don't want anything. Is that clear?
Clear.
So now sometimes when they talk philosophy, they tell us directly, they talk about desires. But sometimes it becomes difficult for us to understand desires. So they use another word, they use other words, meaning exactly the same thing. And these other representative words are sometimes lobha, greed, which is nothing but more desire. Or they use fear, which is nothing but fearing the loss of something you have. Or sometimes they use the word anger, which is deflected thought current. So all of this is basically the same thing. The base principle is desire. But now in explanation, sometimes they use these other words. In this context, Krishna is talking of, not Krishna, Arjuna is telling us about his fear, his great fear. Now, this fear is nothing but desire. And it comes to us in very strange ways. Mahesh is not there, no? This is not Mahesh's class. Okay, so Mahesh had this question that suppose there's a person, he wants a watch which is very expensive. So he's longing for the watch and his intellect tells him, no way, you cannot afford that watch. And it's hell for that individual because his mind wants it, his intellect says you can't afford the watch, you have to pay the rent with that money, how can you pay for the watch so much? And he says that when the intellect comes into picture, life becomes hell. Because if the fellow didn't have an intellect in the first place, he wouldn't have said this and he would have gone and bought his watch, he would have been happy. Intellect comes into picture, life becomes hell. So, do you agree with him?
One only needs to experience the hell when intellect doesn't come into play.
Yes, okay. That is later. But for that man right now, when he's wanting that watch, it's hell for him. But remember base principles. Today is our discussion of base principles, I think. Base principle is the intellect will give you joy. The intellect, so we in our minds translate that as the intellect will give you happiness in the future. That's not correct. That's not what it's saying. Yeah, Varsha, we think permanent, future. That's not correct. When the intellect works, you should be happy now. Otherwise, intellect is not working. All the time, don't think future. Bahut ho gaya future. The future should have arrived by now. 20 years you're studying Vedanta, in the future I'll get happiness. What is wrong? Baba, when is this future going to come? Okay, what lots of people are saying a lot of things. Okay, Deepraj says, no, you're right, Deepraj. As a mathematician, you know that if a principle is there, applicable across the board. Yes, before it gets better, no, Varsha. Answer is no, not permanent. It is giving the joy of the rent. No joy in giving rent, Ashya, only pain in paying the rent. No joy whatsoever. You've never paid rent, Ashya, so you don't know how painful it is. Very painful. let's see where, but the percentage of intellect working is not higher than the mind. Remember, subtle, if it works at all, you should have 5 Pandavas, 100 Kauravas. Don't ever forget that. So, coming to Mahesh's question, intellect has created hell. Is this true? If you all can't answer the question, it means you've not been paying attention at all. I don't know what y'all are saying no to though. You can. Because there's no end to mind's demand. That is correct. Is the intellect capable of creating hell in your personality?
No, Janki ji. It helps
Base
in
principle.
solving the problem. Yes.
Oh, base principle. Now you explain to Mahesh, who is not there today, how is this possible? And if you all don't know the answer to this question, you know why you don't know the answer to the question? Because you're paying no attention to what is going on in class. At least you should get a hint from the fact of what we were talking about. What were we talking about?
Subtle, controlling, and pervading the process.
No, that's not where we were when we went here. It's the mind that is creating the problem. Okay, fine. So it's hell, right? For that person, it's hell. Nobody, not a soul was listening. Unnecessarily, I talk. You should have learned from the wiser people of the past. They didn't talk. Not a single soul was listening. What was the point where we went into Mahesh's question? Okay, Varsha. That's Ashia, not quite, but you're closer than everybody else. What is the point at which we went off? Nobody, not a soul. Koi to daya karo.
And
Huh? What, Manoj?
so is it like if we are saying gross?
No, just answer my question. What is the point at which we went off?
Like what we were discussing was whether the gross is controlling the subtle.
No,
And
we
if the
got
gross
that
is
point. We had gone on. Oh, very good. All right, chalo, fine. Thank you, Meera. Thank you, Varsha. Finally, somebody is going close to what we have. What are we talking about? We finished gross and subtle, right? Then we came to the text. Then what did we start talking about? How the basic principle is desire. Desire is used in different ways. Sometimes as anger they use, sometimes fear they use, sometimes greed they use. But they're basically talking about the desire. Okay, so here what is he doing? He's now, all these verses are on fear because poor Arjuna is terrified out of his life. You're seeing, he's terrified. Everybody, there's just terror going on here. Now the question is, now, so from there we branched off to Mahesh and his question about what and what not and the other. So at least remember where we were. Because if you remember where we were, you will know the answer to the question. Yeah, Manoj, what is your answer?
How fear arises from desire? I think that is where we started.
That is what? What is the, yeah, but you wanted to offer an answer to the question, right? To Mahesh's question. So what was that?
Yeah, fear arises because like we have something and we have fear of losing it. If we did not have that thing, we will not have fear of losing that.
No. What is your answer to Mahesh's question? Oh, you weren't trying to answer that. Okay, fine. Anybody has an answer to Mahesh's question? Intellect creates hell according to it. True, false. Whichever one you choose, you have to justify your answer. क्या सब लोग सो गए क्या? Nobody. Can some more people put on your videos so that I still the mind?
I refute Mahesh's saying that intellect will create hell.
Yeah,
Because intellect will identify what is creating hell, and then it will change that thought process. Then there is no hell at all.
Correct. But I don't think he'll be satisfied with you. Shilpa, it will give temporary pain. No, intellect gives you no pain. I mean, the pain of the intellect is very little. It's right in the beginning of the process. In the first, after the first 2 months, 1 month, what pain is there? Intellect is just a happy journey. It's just the initial speed bump, and then you're all cool. So if you're saying I've done Vedanta for 5 years or 1 year or 2 years and I still haven't found the bump is over, then my friends, you're not doing Vedanta. You're doing something else. I don't know what you're doing. You should be in no pain whatsoever. After a month or two, I mean, unless something like dramatic, I don't know, something really dramatic, and okay, chalo, after 6 months. Some people could have a really bad problem.
In the intellect is not what is.
1 second, Varsha.
Sorry.
It will give temporary pain of not getting the watch. But then eventually you will understand that it is not a permanent, it is a happiness that you didn't buy a watch and had paid a rent.
Not so. I mean, eventually it's after when? No, Bharat, this question hasn't created help. Poor thing.
Can I?
Varsha, I'm just reading what is here already.
The pain is not coming because of the pain is not coming from the intellect working. The pain was already there because of the desire. The intellect is not cause of the pain.
Okay, that is one way, but you're just escaping.
There would be pain any which way because of the desire and then the fear and the anger that comes with it.
Okay, but I think you're just escaping the problem. So let's see. Elsie here says it's not the intellect but mind working. Can you explain what you're saying, Elsie?
Because only desire can agitate you.
So
desire means mind.
That's right. So he is saying that that my intellect is causing me hell because I want to buy the watch. But my intellect is saying, no, you have to pay the rent with that money. You can't buy the watch. You can't afford it. So intellect is creating hell.
Mind is overpowering the intellect.
Okay, but you have to tell him. You have to prove how is intellect creating or not creating the hell. Deep Raj, the intellect helps reduce desires. The desires create hell, so intellect cannot cause hell. That's a generalization, Deep Raj. It is true, everything you're saying, but doesn't answer his question.
So his intellect has not decided whether he really needs that watch or not, whether he really requires that, and whether he can find the resources to buy that particular watch if he really needs it. So that intellect will actually help him decide upon that. So intellect is not causing hell. It is only and only his desire, which he is not able to find the resources for it. And intellect has not played a role in that actually. His intellect is sleeping that time when he feels that it is causing me hell. In fact, intellect is the factor which will help him decide whether he really needs that watch or not, or whether he can afford it right now or not. Maybe he can postpone that desire.
Yeah. You're sort of edging towards the answer, but he would have argued with you, Mahesh. He would have said, my intellect knows fully well that I cannot afford the watch. Means nothing to do with him. He also doesn't play rent. He's just giving hypothetical. situation. Akhila, very good, Akhila. Excellent. I didn't actually think anyone was going to get it. At least I hope you've got it. I won't ask you to
So,
explain. Go
can I-
ahead. Yeah.
So it is actually not the intellect talking when he says that don't buy the watch, you need to pay the rent. It's his other desire for, staying in the house. Or so it's, his.
Correct.
It's not the intellect. The pain is coming from his desires only.
Very
Different desires.
Very. Now you're beginning to see what's going on in our life. Intellect is not playing a part at all, because if it did play a part, there would be no hell. What is happening is there's a clash in this case between desire. Now, if you've really understood, give me the second word, between desire and
Decision.
Attachment.
Action.
very good, Ashia. Arey Baba, please, Vedanta always goes on a track. It doesn't go here, there, kuch bhi maro. Remember the point we're discussing. Which is the point we're discussing?
Fear.
Yeah.
So it is now a problem, not between mind and intellect. It's a problem between two things. They are
Desire and fear.
very good. He wants the watch. He's frightened of losing the house. This individual, whoever it is. Desire and fear. Now are you all getting it? So it is never, intellect is not causing us this problem in my life. It is always desire and fear. This is where we are stuck. Intellect will create, though this is not a tussle, Manoj, between mind and intellect. This is a tussle between two desires. Means one desire and for the watch and one desire for continuance of a certain level of living. So he's frightened he'll lose this level of living if he buys the watch. So it is a tussle between desire and fear. All right, all these times, usually when we think it's between mind and intellect, it's never between mind and intellect. Intellect is far too smart for the mind. Remember, intellect is subtler. The intellect keeps the mind calm. That's its job in life. When the intellect works, we are happy, we are comfortable, we are successful, we get along with people. I don't know, whatever else you want to add, because the intellect is working. So, here too, you see the immense power that fear has on us. When we think we are being sensible, when we think we're using the intellect, we are actually being motivated by fear. Because we are either being pulled by our desire or pushed away from it by our fear. That's why you have a few verses on fear, because it is something that hurts the human heart. And that comes about through various ways, like we already discussed, right? How does this fear come? It comes out of ignorance. It comes out of desire. It comes out of attachment. It comes out of selfishness. It comes out of otherness. They're all sort of interlinked. It's not like they're different. They're all interlinked. And the base fear comes out of the ignorance of the self itself. Because when you're ignorant of the self, you have otherness, you have desire, you have attachment, you have selfishness. It's just a stream that goes on. So the eventual answer is only the knowledge of the self. What other answer is there? But that's we say, okay, I'm not interested in self-realization. As if we have a choice in this matter. Oh, I will see about self-realization later on. Yeah. Try the stunt then. See whether it all works. Cannot work. So he says here, seeing your mighty form with many mouths and eyes, many arms, thighs, feet, many stomachs, many terrible tusks, O Mahabaho. The worlds are terrified. And so am I. So when you meet somebody who's greater than you, more disciplined, more honest, more something, you're terrified. And more so if you're not all those things. Less so if you are more of those things. Means if you're also honest, you're also disciplined, then you are terrified in the sense of reverence. But if you are not honest, you are not disciplined, you are not clear, then you're terrified as in terrified only. So who are you terrified? Somebody, some personality that stands head and shoulders above everybody else. So earlier, when there was the karta of the joint family, that man on top was supposed to be like. Now it is anybody and anything. Even in institutions, I don't know if you've realized, in different institutions, like see President of India. So many people have become President of India. But which name do we remember most? Can you, when I say President of India, which name comes top of a mind recall?
Abdul Kalam.
Why him? At top of mind recall. Then you'll have to stop and think of the others. And of course, you'll know all the others and they'll come to you slowly. But top of the mind recall, because he was a man of stature. It is not that the president's chair gave him stature. He was a man of stature. That's the difference, Some people, they leave their organization and nobody cares about them anymore because where is his character? The chair was his adornment. We have to reach a stage where we adorn the chair. The chair is worthy of respect because we are on it. That's the state we must be in. Not we are worthy of respect because we are on the chair. Put a dog there also, he becomes worthy of respect. How does that mean anything? So when you have a mighty stature like this, then people are fearful. You have a natural reverence if you're like that, and really terrified if you're not like that. I mean, somewhat like that. Okay, verse 24.
Thank you, Ji. Sorry, just a question on the earlier example. So if two desires are in conflict, then intellect in that situation has to decide which desire is justified to back.
Yes, and how, when, why. Suppose I'm longing, my mind is longing for something. And even though it is slightly beyond what I can afford, I must decide what I can do, how to manage it. I'm not here to torture my mind. I'm not here to be miserable. I'm here to enjoy my life, right? So how will I do this? How can I do this intelligently? What is the proper way of doing it, if necessary? Because I'm not going to be happy without it, I might as well figure out how to get it. Can I say, okay, let me, buy it across 4 months or whatever I want to do? Say whatever I want to do, struggle with something else. Because I have to figure out a way by which I am comfortable in my life, right? I'm not living up to somebody else's standards or anything. Each one of us does what they need to do.
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Verse 24. Nabhasprusham deepamaneekavarnam Vyatananam deepta vishalanetram Drushtva hetvam pravyathitantaratma Dhrutim na vindami shamam cha Vishnu Nabhasprusham deeptamanekavarnam Vyatananam deepta vishalanetram Drushtva hetvam pravyathitattaratma Dhrutim na vindami shamam cha Vishnu Dhrutim na vindami shamam cha Vishnu. O Vishnu, Dhrutim na vindami shamam cha. I don't get dhruti, I don't get shama. I have no courage, I have no peace. Who is he saying this to? Vishnu. He's seeing the all-pervading Lord and he's saying, I'm getting no peace, I'm getting no courage. Our understanding is just the opposite, right? If God comes, I should be very peaceful and I should have tremendous courage. Look at what happened to when the Lord
Prahlad.
huh?
Prahlad.
Prahlad. Narasimha avatar. He's come like a lion. He's come. And a small little boy. All the court has disappeared. They ran for their lives. And this young boy is standing there and he's praying. And everybody else has run for their lives. Can you imagine you break a pillar and then one lion comes out of it? Frightening, no? But the child is not frightened. All the adults, all the courtiers, all the veers and the Mahaveers have all run away from there. They were all busy fighting the devas and they were winning and they couldn't see this thing. And Arjuna says, Dhrutimna Vindami Shamam cha Vishnu. O Vishnu, I do not find courage, I do not find peace. Why? Your nabhas prasham, you're touching the sky. Deeptam Aneka Varnam. So many colors you are shining with. Your mouth is opening. You have deep the Vishala Netram, big eyes. Can you imagine somebody with massive eyes look at you? Remember, with one eye is the sun, one eye is the moon. There are big eyes looking at you. Frightening, no? The thought that God is watching everything you're doing. It's frightening if
we're doing something bad.
You're doing something, yeah. If you're doing some nakra, it is very frightening to have big eyes watching you like that. But if you're doing the right things, if you have no ego, then anyone can watch you doing whatever you're doing. What is the problem? Drishtva pravyatitantaratma. My atma is, my mind is, having seen this, drishtva, having seen, pravyatitantaratma. My atma, my mind is terrified. Dhrutim na vindami shamam cha Vishnu. Find no peace. Why? Selfishness, self-centeredness makes us insecure. Now you may argue and say, but Arjuna was not a selfish person. What is he so terrified about? Selfishness brings terror. Arjuna is not even a selfish person, yet he is terrified. So if it is true that if you were being a good person, then you should be very happy with the Lord. Then what is Arjuna so terrified about? What is he? How did he get into so much fear? He's going to say, Prasita Devesha, Prasita, I mean, like, have mercy. Close, Samya Rupa, take away this form. Give me your, your Samya Rupa, your gentle form. How did Arjuna get so terrified? Is he a selfish person? We have always kept him as the good person, the noble person. Duryodhana and the lot are selfish. This guy is supposed to be a good person, but he's so terrified. Why is he so terrified?
He asked for something he's not ready for.
Okay.
Or in other words, it signifies overstepping or this thing, spiritual capacity.
Okay, that is one way of looking at it. Correct. That's not incorrect. Correct. That is one what we had discussed earlier. So of course that is right. Now, the question is, why is he terrified? When if selfishness causes terror, what is Arjuna terrified about? You have 1 week to think about that. Okay. Hariom.